anyway, what these examples are, there are a couple of them that you almost have to look at fairly closely. So maybe when we do make the break, you can come up and actually take a look at a couple of these things. But I wanted to go over through some of the operations and whatnot that we were doing. Okay, because we're going to go through this. This is going to be sort of a show and tell type of thing, but we're going to go through this because it's kind of important when you're starting to think about this. Now, who has oaks out here? Okay, so we got, well, I mean, this is Sacramento. You can have lots of oaks out in this direction. I brought several different species of these, and I noticed you have a few others that are over on the side here. So we actually have a lot of trees that we can actually talk about. But we want to talk about the operations and how we actually approach some of this stuff, and that's why I wanted to go through this. This thing that you have in your hand right here. First of all, are there new people in bonsai here that have just sort of started? Great. Okay. We're going to go through some terms and some various other things here. But oak trees come in two types, as you probably know, or many of you know, but they're deciduous and they're also broadleaf evergreens. The deciduous ones you see quite a lot, the valley oaks. I've got one over on this side. There's another one back there. A number of them are deciduous where they lose their leaves, and there are also a lot of evergreens, really nice trees, from coast live oaks to black oaks up in the hills and all kinds of shrubs and things like that. So when you're actually going to be working on a tree or you get a tree, you have to figure out what type of tree it is because you treat them a little bit differently, a broadleaf evergreen as opposed to a deciduous tree. You start off on any tree, and this applies to many, many trees, but I'm trying to focus on oaks in this particular case. The first thing that you have to do once you get it growing is to get the trunk up to the point where you can actually do something with it and make an interesting looking tree. One of the concepts in bonsai is that you like to build taper in a tree. The taper means that it's larger at the bottom, and as it goes up from one branch to another branch to the little sub branches and to the twigs and everything gets smaller and closer together as it goes. So this is the basic idea of taper that we want. It would be really odd to have a little tiny trunk up there and these huge branches coming off of it. It would almost be impossible because I don't know how you would actually do that. But we want to get that feeling because trees in nature, as they mature, really do get that taper to them. You know, when you have a tree that's first starting out as a seedling, it's just about the same diameter all the way up, that first group of leaves that it has. And as it grows, it gets that taper that we want. So this is something that we want to look at. And this is a stage of development where we're feeding it like crazy and trying to get it to grow exactly how we want as far as getting that bulk so that branches coming off of it look natural. Then you start working on the primary branches, the first ones that come out. Now, one of the things about an oak tree and most broadleaf evergreens and deciduous trees, as opposed to conifers, is that you get a growth pattern that grows up and out. In other words, the branches tend to go up and go out to the side and then fill out as they go out here. Most of the conifers that we see and the way that they are styled is that because it's a softwood, as it gets larger, these limbs tend to come down at an angle that's a little bit below. And what happens is that we form pads on them that are sort of fan shaped to the outside, but they're kind of flat on the bottom, and they just give that nice rounded feeling to them. And then the number of pads you have is what you have when you're going to a tree. One thing about the oaks is that many of these oaks start off as a single trunk, coming off as the single trunk, but then the branches start to grow out, and they grow out in an up and outward manner, and they become so heavy they're almost like sub trunks as they come out, and they form their own canopies in different parts of the basic canopy that you have for the tree. Now, if you think of a canopy as being kind of a umbrella shaped thing, if you look at a oak, for instance, that's on a hillside, you're going to notice that the silhouette of this entire thing has a basic kind of an umbrella type of shape, but it's broken up, and it's broken up by these little sub branches that come out and fill out, so that you get this nice tufting as it goes up, and you can see how it blossoms and becomes larger up at the top, and then it kind of filters down into different branches that you see. And that's the way that we try to approach putting these trees together. After you're done with getting those original branches that come out, then you got your sub branches. You got the ones that actually come out from the side of that and form all of the foliage area that you're going to be using later on when you really get into maintenance and the final look of the tree. So these secondary branches are very important, and you want those to start from as close in as possible. I think we've all seen trees, and we've even collected trees where it's got a great base, and there are a lot of, there are a number of branches that are coming off of it, but all the foliage is way out here and the trunk is way in here, and there's nothing in between. What we want to do is we want to create a tree so that we have the branches, a primary branch that comes out like my arm here, and then we have sub branches that are coming out, the secondary branches, and then the tertiary branches, which are smaller and smaller as it goes out, going all the way out. But what we have to do is we have to figure out a way of getting those things to live. And the way we do that is to get these branches that are starting from way back here to be able to get to the outside of the tree where they can actually get sun. If they're blocked by some other branches, they're going to get weak and die. So this is something that we want to develop right off the bat. And that has to do with getting these branches to come out as soon as possible. Once you leave the trunk, then you want a branch coming out here, 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 and here, as opposed to just everything out where my hand is. Now you can actually build a tree like that, but then it looks just like an empty tree, and it doesn't give you a lot of interest to it. Then you get into the twigs and the foliage and whatnot. And a lot of times, you hear about a rule of two as far as, how many leaves you want to keep in a particular area. And the rule of two basically says that at any given point, when you want it to bifurcate, when you want to actually split it, what you want to have is you want to have one that is going to be the leader and one that's going to be a side shoot. Well, sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't, especially when it's out at the outside. If it's on the outside of the perimeter, I've noticed in a lot of oak trees that some of the branches, for instance, will shoot up like this, where the inner node being the distance between the leaves in there, where the inner nodes is quite long. And I have other shoots on the same tree many times where all of the leaves, the entire amount of leaves are within that amount of area. So that if you cut each of those and tried to get those equal, then what would happen is that if you had one leaf on this one, it might be that long. If you had one leaf on the other one, it'd be about that long. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to even out that foliage mass at the very end of the tree. And so you have to, instead of just going to 2 buds, sometimes you're going to have maybe 4 or 5 or 6 buds that are in between there, reaching out to the same length. In other words, the same distance away from the branch that you're doing it on, because the one right next to it has one leaf that's out that far. Does that make any sense to you? Or am I confusing people? Well, we'll see. Okay. A lot of times then you get to a certain stage where you're actually maintaining the tree. In other words, what you want to do is you have the shape that you want to keep that, but the tree wants to grow. The two things that a tree wants to do is it wants to get tall and crowd out its neighbors, and it wants to make little trees. And then that's basically what it wants to do. And so there's a real competition there, but it keeps on growing and it keeps on growing. If you put any of our bonsai back in the ground, it's going to all of a sudden take out. This nice little tree that's about 16 inches tall is all of a sudden going to be 30 feet tall. It's going to blow out whatever you tried to do. So it always wants to get bigger. That's one of the reasons we put them in the small pots, and we continuously on a yearly or every 3 years or so transplant them so that we can keep that energy and keep the tree operating in a small amount of soil, and it keeps them small, or it at least tends to keep them small. Okay, when you're looking at a tree, there are a lot of times you're looking for specific and special features that it might have. As we have here, you know, some of these trees are single trunk. We got a double trunk over on that side, and we have multiple trunks that are right down towards the end on that. It looks like a canyon oak or something down there at the very end. So there, you can have any number of trunks that you want. As a matter of fact, at the end of the driveway of my daughter's house up in Quincy, there's some black oaks, and there's a number of trunks that actually come out, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing coming out. And then you know, it has that same kind of form, but each one of these trunks gives you, you know, a little slightly different lengths to it, and it is really a very, very interesting group. So don't be afraid to do multiples if the trees really call for it. Okay, some of them, you'll notice the coast live oak, for instance, has pretty smooth bark. This is a coast live oak, but it's an old guy and it doesn't have smooth bark, but there are smooth bark ones out here. And some of them are tremendously fissured. And usually that comes with age too. But you can see some of the Israeli oak that we have over there, and a couple of the other ones have really wonderful fissured bark. The Quercus lobata, your valley oak, has wonderful bark, nice fissures to it, and it's just one of my favorite barks for a tree is that valley oak. So there's all kinds of things, and a lot of times if you can feature that, it really becomes part of the wonder of your particular tree. Then we get into deadwood. Everything gets deadwood. Everything has a branch that's going to die. And in bonsai, we have, for a terminal that is dead, we call it a jin. So that's a terminal. It's like a branch. The whole branch went out here, and the deadwood that's there is what we call a jin. You don't typically see gins, or at least you don't see them for a long time on an oak tree. Oak is very hard. I mean, they make chairs out of it. But imagine taking a chair and putting it out in your backyard for 3 years and see what happens. What's going to happen is that the wood itself is going to check. It's going to split. It's going to fall apart. It's not set up for long-term viability as far as staying there once it's dead. And typically what's going to happen is it's just going to rot out. And even one of the terminals is finally going to rot out, and you're just going to have a little jut of maybe a little bit of wood that comes out of it. On the other hand, you do see a lot of damaged trees where they have the what they call shari, and shari is basically a dead portion of the tree that is surrounded by live tissue. You usually see this on the side of a trunk where something, maybe a car hit it, who knows what happened, but there's something where a certain amount of the trunk died. And then what happens is that the trunk or the tree itself will start to perform wound wood around that and actually try to close that up eventually. But you see that quite often on oaks. You also see what they call an url, which is like an indentation or a cave or something inside of a tree where it's kind of rotted out at that point, but it hasn't completely filled in. So it's one of those things that you see quite often, and it can be used very effectively on a tree to show either damage for, a lost limb, or perhaps right at the base of it, where animals might be able to crawl in if it was a large tree. So that's an interesting thing. The only thing I would say is that gins, if you do have them, are just going to be tiny little stubs, because they will rot out fairly quickly, and you want to give that idea. You don't want that idea of like on a juniper, which actually has resins in its wood that will protect it and will allow it to stick around for years and years, maybe even a century or two of deadwood. Okay, then it does have flowers. You believe? Okay, they do come out, and they come out after the leaves typically, and it usually is occurring sometime in April. The leaves start for us back in where I am. They start coming out probably in the March time frame. They're probably maybe end of February, early March, and that type of thing. And then you get flowers. You get catkins, which are the drupaceous little flowers that just kind of hang down. That's the male portion, and then the female flowers are usually farther back in the tree. It can it usually is wind pollinated, so that the pollen from that tree will actually get into the female flowers of another tree, and it actually will have fruit called acorns. But it can also do that on its own tree, but typically they won't last. They'll fall off at some point, and they just won't come to fruition. But the acorns that you get, and I'm still starting acorns. I still plant those, and I get them going, and I just get a big kick out of them. Okay, the roots, you want to have radial roots. You want to have roots that are actually coming out all the way around. I know most of us have seen these trees that we've gotten, and we thought we were getting a great deal at the nursery, and it's been in this can forever. And you notice that the roots actually go out to this the edge of the can and just continue to whirl around until they get tired of doing it. And it's really difficult to get good roots out of that. So what we're trying to do is induce roots that'll come directly out of the trunk of the tree and actually go to the sides and start to form a really nice nabari, which is that area from the trunk down to the soil level where the beginning of those roots starts, where it goes into the soil. And we don't want to, when we're actually developing that, we don't want to have the roots look like fingers coming out. We don't want to see the entire around a particular root. We want to see just the start of it going into the soil. So we just want to see a portion of that, not the entire finger going into the soil. So if you do have exposed roots and you do show all of that, it kind of shows like there's been some erosion going on with a particular tree, and it gives a little bit weaker look. So you might think about putting soil in there and actually bringing the level of that up a little bit, and I think your tree would show a little bit better. Okay, yes, in the back, Roger.
John, on the taproot, when you're developing a tree, how do you cut it and transfer that energy to the radial roots versus the taproot circling around and around?
Okay, everybody heard this as a taproot question?
There's some seedling, there's some cork bark oaks here that are 1 year, and I went in and cut the taproot on them at about 6 months, but they are going to need, whoever wins them, development on that taproot to get the radial roots you're talking about.
Okay, so let's think in terms of, let's say that a taproot basically, okay, the way this thing works is an acorn starts off and it sends what they call a radical down, and the radical is just a kind of a boring root that goes down and tries to find water. After that is developed just a little bit, it sends up some leaves, and then it starts to become an actual oak. Okay, that radical then continues down until it can find the soil, and it starts to be the primary source of all of the energy and everything that's going to happen with the tree. As it develops, it's also going to develop some lateral roots. In other words, side roots are going to come out from that, and they're going to start to come out in more profusion as the tree gets a little bit older. As it goes, what the function of that taproot is first of all to get the water and everything and all the nutrients and everything that the tree needs, but also it gives stability to the tree. It keeps it from knocking over in a high wind and that type of thing. And it's important to the tree from that standpoint for quite some time. When we collect a tree, for instance, we're going out to take a look at that tree and we want to collect it. What we're eventually going to have to get it. I mean, get rid of that taproot, because the taproot can go quite a long way, and the taproot many times is huge. In other words, it's quite a big piece of wood that goes down. So if you have lateral roots that are around that, you can wean that off if you wanted to over the course of say a year or two. And actually water the tree. A lot of times I'll just take it right then and cut that taproot off. Most of the trees that I've gone after are old enough to have lateral roots. Even though you don't have a whole lot of them, they will start to actually take over from that taproot, because the taproot becomes inoperable after a while because of these side roots. The side roots are actually doing all the work of bringing up the nutrients and the moisture to the tree, and the taproot is kind of left out of it, and it's just this big stick in the wood in the soil. So you can actually get underneath there, and that's what I do is I cut that thing off, and I keep as many of these side roots as I possibly can find. Now in California, a lot of times because of our drought and everything, the trees have to go down quite a ways, or the roots have to go down quite a ways before they have these little lateral roots. And that becomes something of a problem there, where they haven't really taken over. So if you do this over time, like if you have a year or something like that, you can cut that taproot and leave the other roots going and let them develop in the ground before you actually take it. Or you can cut it and then take it and take your chances as far as the tree surviving. I don't know whether you've had problems with that or yeah. Yeah.
And so when do you cut that taproot on acorns that you started as seedlings?
Oh, okay. Now there's sometimes what I'll do is that radical, even before it gets down, before it actually starts going down, if I'm going to be growing this, not putting it in the ground, but putting it in as a bonsai, I'll let it just get that start there, and I'll clip the tip of it so that it'll start to bifurcate itself. In other words, it will send out little roots that come from that right off the bat. So, right from the get-go. Yes.
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, I'm going to record. He was asking about colanders. Do I ever use those as basically as pots for my tree? It's an excellent way of doing it. In fact, I use what they call pond baskets. Surprised I didn't bring one here, but I have most of my trees, especially when they're developing, in these pond baskets. Basically, it's a basket that you put in aquatic plants into a pond or something that you might have, but it's just nothing but a colander with sides that are completely perforated with holes, and the bottom is as well. Those are perfect for actually growing oaks and starting them off like that. And until you get it into the bonsai pot, I don't see any reason why you can't use them. They're very beneficial. And what happens is that as the roots go out towards the sides, they come in contact with the air, because there's all of this, all these holes and the perforations and whatnot, and that kills the roots right at the tip. But by doing so, it actually makes them break into smaller roots behind that, and it gives you a nice root system. It's an excellent way of doing it. So yes, colanders are great, and so are the pond baskets that I use, which is basically the same thing. We have another question. Yes.
We have a question from the chat. So this is from Kathy. What is the best time of year to collect oaks and repot? And if it's later in the talk, then that can be answered.
Okay.
Too.
No, that we can work that right into the same thing, because since we're talking about roots and we're talking about all of this, the best time to do it is after probably about 2 weeks after you've had rain, sometime around Christmas time. If you've had a pretty good storm or something that comes through. What you want to have is you want to have the tree as hydrated as possible when you take it. And you want it if you can, in a semi-dormant time period. And that's a perfect time for taking it. Is sometime in late December. We're going to go through this. Okay, let's jump to the thing that the pass out that I have, and over on the right-hand side at the very top is the growth cycle. And we're talking about the angle and intensity of the sun and the temperature. We're going to talk about that. But we're also talking about, just below that is the winter solstice. We all know that is the shortest day of the year. Up to that point, I'm absolutely dragging because I'm thinking it gets darker and darker earlier and earlier. And right after that, it starts getting lighter. Not measurably, but at least, it makes me feel better. That is the time when you're going to have the start of exactly what you're talking about there, as far as collecting. It's a great time because it's starting to come into action. Here in California, we don't really freeze very much out here or over in the coastline where I am, and there's always activity. But once the tree becomes hydrated because you had a storm or something coming through, and you give it a few days, give it maybe a week or so for it to actually get down, it makes it an excellent time to start to take trees out right then. I would take them out between then and probably March 1st or something. You might even be able to get away with it a little bit longer depending on the tree. For instance, cork oaks come out much later, probably 6 weeks later than my coast live oaks where I am. So there's a difference in time there as far as when they actually wake up and start really putting foliage out. Okay, but I wanted to go through the various things. The growing season really starts, once it starts to warm up and the angle of the sun. For instance, the angle of the sun is about as low as it's going to get because you have the shortest day. As it grows up, you get more hours of sun, and also the temperature tends to go up. And there's that confluence of temperature and sun that all of a sudden starts these trees. They're metabolically ready to start going once it gets warm and they have enough sunlight. So that happens sometime between the winter solstice and the vernal equinox, which is March 21st or 20th, or right around that time period. And that's when you are all of a sudden in full bore. We're starting off the growing season. And that goes through the summer solstice, which we just had a few days ago. And this is a perfect time right now because we're growing at about the maximum that we can. If it starts getting down a little bit more than 100 degrees a day, that's a little high for it. But at this point, you can do all kinds of operations on your tree and expect it to really respond well. Somebody was asking about defoliation and whether you should, when you should do defoliation. You should probably do if you're going to be defoliating trees, and the reason that you would probably be doing that is to reduce the leaf size or to get access so that you can put wires on it. But also to get those new leaves in. You do this a lot with maples where you actually defoliate a little bit earlier than this, and then you can do that throughout the summer. It's the time when you can expect to get almost all of the new shoots to come out from where the leaves were when you defoliated. As you get later in the year, you're going to, or if you do it multiple times, what happens is that the percentage of those successful shootings of leaves and whatnot go down a little bit. Instead of getting, say, 95% of them, you might get 80% of them, and then later on, you might not even get that. So this is a perfect time to be doing so much work on your trees, and I really would encourage you to get started on it and to think about that. As you go through the summer, There are times when it starts to really slow down a little bit, and that's usually because of the heat. When we've had a lot of hot days like this, the trees themselves have to just sort of settle down because they can't handle the water loss that they're getting at that particular time. So they just kind of go into a holding pattern while that's going on. They can continue that as it cools down, but I mean, if you have nothing but 100 and 105, you're going to have a sort of a shutdown in the amount of growth that you have, with the exception of certain trees. There are certain ones like the cork barks tend to like that. Maybe it's because of the cork and it keeps them a little bit cooler inside. I don't know, but they tend to do very well even in hot weather. As it gets down towards the end of the year, you're getting into September and the autumnal equinox. Again, that's equal sun and dark during the day. All of a sudden, the tree is actually taking the energy that it had been expending all the time, and it starts bringing it back into the actual trunk and the roots and everything else to save it for the spring outbreak that it's going to have after the next spring. So this constant cycle is always going on of full growth and then pulling back and getting ready for the next growth the next year. So as far as the time of year for doing most of these things, this is a beautiful time to be working on your trees, and don't pass it up, because sometimes you get so much growth that it actually harms some of that interior growth of the tree if you don't start thinning out some of those branches and cleaning it up. And you can lose some of the branches that you actually want to be part of your tree by just not giving them enough sun in order to get out to that surface area on the outside of your canopy. It's really important to clean that up. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get into thinning out over on the other side. Okay, when you're working on a tree, the things that you got to have to start off with, it's going to be good if you have good color just to start off. If it's good color for that type of tree, it's a good time, that's a tree that you can work on. You need these requirements, though. You need to get a bushy growth. In other words, everything is starting to come out. But you also need to have a couple of runners. These are the ones that escape like this one here is starting to escape the canopy of the tree. This particular tree was completely defoliated earlier, and we cut back because the branches were getting a little bit outlandish and we needed to do it, and it's come back like a champ. So, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So you want runners extending out from that bushy growth that you have. And usually you're looking for hardened growth in order to do it. As it comes out, it's very succulent growth. It's very soft growth. It's very easy to damage that growth. There are instances when you actually cut it before it gets hardened. In other words, by hardening, I mean it turns a darker color, it gets stiffer, and it's actually photosynthesizing fully at that point. But there are things like maples, for instance, when you catch them before they get completely extend and before they're actually hardened off. And if you can actually pinch the tips at that point, you can stop this elongation of the internodes, the distances between your leaves, and you can stop that as soon as you pluck off the top. And we do that quite often with maples, but we also can do that with oaks when we're doing a maintenance of the tree. In other words, we're just trying to keep it at the same size and keep the internodes really short. Sometimes the internodes, if you just let them go out, will blow out, and instead of having internodes that might be a half an inch or something like that, they might be 2 inches long. And you really can't use that, especially if it's at the top of the tree or if it's out on the outside. So you need to be doing this on a timely manner. Okay, then we look at the operations that you can do if you have problems with your trees. Something that affects the whole tree, and this is something that Peter got into quite a lot with us, is the sun element. In other words, sometimes you have too much sun, sometimes you don't give it enough sun. There's a lot of cases when you might find that it's too much sun and you need to put some shade cloth or put it into an area that you get a little bit more shade on a regular basis. Also, wind damage. I don't know about you out here, but we have had just tremendous winds all the time. And I mean, everything is blowing around and it's knocked over. My hollyhocks are all on the ground. I mean, they just grow up there and then they just completely collapse. So we're getting on a regular basis. It didn't used to be that way. It just seems like it's gotten more and more difficult to have, you know, the trees or to have grow the trees without all this wind damage that's done. And it can actually take out more water with the wind than it does with the sun. So a lot of times it really sucks it out there. And so you might need to adjust that. You might need to, I have an actual shade structure that goes over it. And I've noticed that it keeps the amount of wind as well. You can see the shade structure kind of blowing like this as the wind is going through it, but it's actually dampening down the amount of wind that you have. So it does two things. It actually shades it from the sun, and it also kind of helps with as far as the wind control is concerned. Okay. Then also water. I mean, we all have these things where if you don't water it, you notice everything limps down on your trees. Does anybody have that experience? Okay. Well, a lot of times if you do that, and if you do that a couple of times where it's actually limped out, it has a proclivity to do that over and over again, and the damage becomes a little bit more apparent if it happens multiple times. So try not to let it the water content to get too low. In the same manner, there's some trees that get too much water, and they can form and you know, all kinds of root rot and various other things that happen under the surface of the soil. Remember, you have to have oxygen in the soil area in order to have healthy roots. And I just got a tree from someone that it was so solid in there you could hardly get anything in it. And I think it was because of the oxygen, but the tree is just really in decline. I'm going to have to do an emergency transplant, or at least get some water and some air down into the actual root system, or the whole thing is going to go. The soil and the pot size. Okay, soil is something that we can control all the time. We can put in different types of composition of soil. We use akadama a lot. Does everybody know what akadama is? Okay. It's a clay-like substance that we get in bags from Japan. It's like buying real estate by the bag from Japan, and it costs that much. But it's a very good element to put into your bonsai pots because it holds moisture, and it also holds nutrients. And a lot of the other things that we use, which are pumice and lava rock, for the most part, aren't going to be able to hold those nutrients and not as much water. Pumice is probably better than the lava rock, but the akadama really gives quite a lot of nutrition to the actual tree. Also, when we're transplanting, when we transplant, we can either slow the tree down or, you know, pick up speed depending on, you know, again, the size of the soil that you put in there. But the interval also is important. Certain trees, like deciduous trees, are going to have to be transplanted more often, say, than conifers that you might have, especially the older conifers. They don't like to be messed with all the time. They like to, you know, have a few years in that pot. That might be anywhere from 5 to 10 years. Just the broadleaf evergreens, probably most of my oaks, I'll be doing those every 3 years or so. And some of the deciduous trees that pop up all the time, like, well, for instance, the maples that we were talking about, have to be done even more often than that, sometimes every year or maybe every other year. So different intervals for different types of trees. And then the fertilizer. A lot of people want to put fertilizer on as soon as they can, or keep it on there all the time. And there's a lot of, you have to think about, go back to this growth cycle thing where the tree itself is actually hoarding a lot of the nutrients that it needs in the winter time so that it has them available for when the spring comes and it's going to start to grow. If we pile on top of that more fertilizer at that time of the year, what we're going to do is we're going to have rampant growth. Now, if you're growing a trunk, maybe this is a great idea. You just keep it going as much as you possibly can because you want everything to just grow and grow and grow. But if you're trying to keep a refined tree down and you put fertilizer in there, you're going to blow the tree out. In other words, it's going to have so much of a reaction. You're going to have larger leaves. You're going to have longer internodes. The whole thing is going to kind of go off on you. It's best to hold off on that. So as far as fertilizing is concerned, I would say you wait until the first growth that you have is completely hardened off at the end of spring or in the middle of spring. And then once you start cutting back on that, then you can go ahead and fertilize because you've already tapped out the stuff that was for the springtime that the tree naturally had. Okay. I put in pest control here because that affects the entire tree too. If you have spider mites or if you have sucking insects of any type, it's not just on one particular part. It's going to be all over your tree, and you need to treat the entire tree in order to get rid of whatever that type of problem is, whether it's a mite or whether it's a fungus that you have. These are the types of things that you want to take care of as soon as you find out about that they're causing you any problems. And in many cases, as far as the fungus is concerned, you might want to do that prophylactically. In other words, you want to do that knowing that there's going to be some problems with certain trees. I have some crepe myrtles that always get what do they call it? Powdery mildew all over them, and that happens all the time. And that's more because it's a certain type of crepe myrtle. I think they have some that aren't susceptible to that, but I know that that's going to happen. So I will actually start to spray those things, knowing that that's going to come at a certain point. So pest control is another part of that that's very, very important. Yes, question. Well, you can get spider mites, I had mentioned those. And sometimes you can use, on spider mites for the most part, I found one of the effective things that you can use is merit. Merit actually a systemic chemical that you can actually get it to go through. And many times that will help out the situation. But there are other things that you can use too, fluoromite or sultan. There are a number of different chemicals that you can use and as long as you rotate them. Because what happens is that their generations are so quick, and the ones that you don't kill, then all of a sudden won't be susceptible to that same chemical. So you change it up on them and give them a hard time. Yes.
And I've been using neem oil.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any success with that?
Neem oil, okay, any kind of an oil is going to be somewhat effective on some of these pests. Neem oil, there are some trees, and I'm not sure exactly which ones, that don't do well with neem oil per se. There are other oils that you can use, but in hot weather, you probably don't want to be using those because they can tend to saute your tree. In other words, if an oil is on there and you're in the sunshine like it is today and you've got 100 degrees, there's a good chance you're going to cause heat damage and really cause some problems on your tree. I'd rather go the other route. Now, another way of doing this, and a lot of people can do this for aphids and any number of things, is to use a spray. In other words, you just use a high pressure spray in order to try and knock them off. For our small trees, a lot of these things you can actually you can actually pick them off. For instance, if you had scale or something like that on oak trees, I've had scale on my coast live oaks, and I can see them because they congregate in certain areas, right in the crotch and right underneath branches and underneath things where you can't normally get at them. But for our little trees, you can go around, you can actually knock those things off and get rid of them that way. But there are systemic things that you can use. And one for insects that's very effective for quite a few things is the merit that I was talking about. And you can get that in various forms. Used to be Bayer. I think it's bio. Who bought that? Bio. No, it's a different chemical company. But at any rate, it used to be Bayer, and it's a 3-in-1 type of bug. It's a systemic bug thing. Anyway, then the Cleary's 3336 for fungus is very effective, but there are also other fungicides that we can use. And we used to always do lime sulfur in the springtime for certain things. It's very difficult to get lime sulfur at this point. California doesn't want it used in agricultural, but you know something? They put it on pets, and you can get it through veterinarians. You can get lime sulfur and on Amazon. Okay, so you just kind of go around it a little bit, but they really don't recommend it as far as the state is concerned for agricultural use anymore. And there are a number of other things that you can do. But okay, so other things that might be hitting that scale, I've seen that quite a bit, and I just had some spider mite damage on that, so I know that is one that affects it. But for the most part, they're pretty good about not being eaten by things. Certain caterpillars, of course, will certain moths will get on it, and you can treat those the same way. But many times, if you need to have a contact spray, something like for instance, the mildew that we were talking about, the Zerotol is a chemical that you can actually spray on it, and it really is not harmful for the tree itself. Yes, sir. Pardon me? Oh, Zerotol. I'm not sure if it starts with a Z or an X. X, yeah. It'd be Xerotol, and it's a very effective spray for that particular thing. So there are a lot of things that you can do, and you can look it up. Actually, looking it up online, it's amazing what you can find. I mean, and if anybody has the AI apps on their phones and ask a few questions about bonsai, and for the most part, you're going to get pretty good answers. I mean, there's some that I'm not really sure of, that I'm not sure where they got their information, but it doesn't sound right to me. But trust but verify. In other words, if you have a gut feeling that what they're telling you isn't right, don't follow their advice. But the AI have actually come up with a lot of solutions that I found are very, very plausible and very usable. So if you want to use that, that's great. Okay, let's get into targeted operations, and this is where you're actually changing just specific parts of the tree. And the most part is in cutting branches or leaves back. And pinching, this is one thing I wanted to bring up. If you are in a maintenance situation and you want to keep everything pretty close to the outline that you have, pinching, in other words, pinching with the soft part of your fingers and whatnot, of the very tips of new buds that are coming out, allowing just a few leaves to actually come out. You can actually take them off like that. If it takes more than that, if you have to pinch with your fingernails, that means you're actually cutting it. And that also means that you probably have wood forming in there, and it's not going to be as effective. So you want to do this while it's still that succulent growth. It's really, really tiny growth. So you use that for shortening the inner nodes and maintaining the shape of the tree. any of these pruning things will actually cause it to bifurcate too. In other words, when you cut it back, it becomes a an area where two new shoots are going to come out where you made that cutback. Okay, pruning is the general pruning that you have on a tree where you're cutting back and you're actually using your scissors and your concave cutters and whatnot. And that's really to determine the shape and to stop a long branch from going and then having it grow into a certain area. And that will also help you to divide those branches. Thinning is one that I brought an example. This is a canyon live oak that I have, and I thinned out one side of this tree, this front portion of the tree. If you get a chance, you know, when they're when they break when you go for a break, you might come in and you'll see that there's a lot of room inside. In other words, I've taken a lot of the branches out inside so that these end branches can develop and really be part of it. And also so you can see the actual branches, sub branches, and the twigs that are in there. If you turn this around, there's so much foliage over on this side that I haven't really started that you can't see into it. It's like looking into a broccoli. And you just cannot get sun penetration, and you'll notice that some of the leaves inside need to be taken out because they've yellowed and browned out. And it also gives you a chance to do some of the cutback on certain areas when it's going out of the silhouette that you want. But this side is much thicker and much denser as far as the foliage is concerned. And this one allows you to see into the branches that are in the tree. And this time of year, it's a good time to do that. And several times a year, it's not a bad idea to do in order to allow the growth and allow some of these shoots here to actually reach out and get out to the outside part of the canopy where they can compete and actually give you good branches inside. We don't want to have everything out on the tips. Like I was saying before, when it's all growing out here and there are no branches that go out into the canopy, that's a very weak form of a bonsai for you. And most trees won't do that. They'll actually kind of prune themselves inside so that they can do that. And this is full of leaves. This is a little bit more open. So if you get a chance, you might want to take a look, see it at this particular piece. Okay. In that first section, when we were talking about what stage a tree is at, this is a Quercus lobata. This is the valley oak, the one that is all around in this area. And there's another one or two of them over on this side over here. Very nice trees. I just love their form. And they probably have the most oaky look of any oaks that you're going to find. They have that open air with all the movement of the branches going all the way up. And they're just really spectacular trees. Occasionally something bad happens to them, like the main trunk of this from this point up died away. So it kicked me back from being in this maintenance area, and I had to revert back to a former stage to develop the main branches and the trunk and everything else. And so I utilized the skeleton of this dead part of the tree that's right in here, and I used that so that I could prop up the branches and get them growing at the angles that I wanted for a more oak-looking bonsai here. So the reason I brought this is not because it was, you know, a pretty tree or anything. It's because it's in a stage where we had to pull back and restart a certain part of that. And you find that with a lot of trees. It usually is your favorite tree that this happens to. You're so pleased with this, you're about to show the thing, and then you find out that you have a branch that just went south on you. So you have to redo something and you have to change things. Don't be afraid to do it. It's just another step in the whole process. Every day. These things take a lot of water. They actually do take quite a lot of water. And I have them. I have actually some fertilizer on here, some Osmocote that I'm using right now. And they're all in pretty good shape. They have good color for what they are. And that's what I want. A lot of times you'll see, you yeah. Go ahead.
I get a lot of seedlings also. And I don't seem to have very much success with the seedlings that I dig up.
The seedlings?
Because the roots go down so far. But I noticed you have yours in a much shallower pot that I'm using
Okay.
for the one.
What he's saying is that he's got now you took some seedlings up, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so he's taken some seedlings up from his yard, and he hasn't had a whole lot of success with them. You typically don't have it if you don't take, everything with it. When it's a seedling, there are very few roots that are really operational. It's just getting started in its growing system. And when you pull that up, you're also banging it around a little bit. You very rarely take it up and it's in a nice clump like that, and you can just put it into a pot. I think one of the things that you find is when you start cutting those little tiny roots when they're so young, they just don't quite make it. And maybe they haven't been watered enough, or maybe you've damaged some of the roots and you didn't even know it. There are various things that can happen to that. But we take trees that are from a nursery and they're growing vertically. In other words, you'll notice that they're typically kind of in pots that are narrow but tall. That's so that they can get a whole bunch of narrow but tall trees into a small area so that they can sell them. What we try to do in bonsai is to, instead of growing them vertically the way that they're growing, we try to grow them horizontally. And that one of the reasons for that is that we take off that tap root that we were talking about with Roger back there. We take that tap root off, and we're encouraging those lateral roots so that it looks more like a landscape tree. This looks much more like a landscape than if this was in a little pot that just went down, say a 5-gallon pot that went, was quite deep. And so this is a visual art. We want it to look like a tree. We don't want to look like a plant in a pot. And that's why we start this lateral growth and encourage that. And we can do that. It's about the same soil volume that you would have if this were this size and maybe twice as deep. So there's plenty of room to grow, but we're just growing, exercising. There was a question here.
I think you mentioned earlier that you can sort of wean the tree off the taproot
Yes.
over a period of time while it's still in the ground.
Yes, if you have, let's say that you owned a piece of property and you went up on the hillside or something and you saw some really cool oaks or something, and you went up there and you noticed that this is one that you wanted to take, and there are very few little lateral roots that are coming off of it. What you could do, because that's your property, is you could actually water that. You could actually do a little cut into the underneath it and actually kill off that taproot, and then water the side portion. Do that for a year or so, and then you would start to get more roots out there. Then when you took the tree, the taproot is already gone. You start going around it and you take the soil where the new roots have actually gone in, and you put that into something like an Anderson flat. An Anderson flat is about 16 inches by 16 inches, about 7 inches deep. And you can take quite a volume of soil and put it into there, and actually start it into something that's much shallower than what you normally could. If I were taking a tree out and I lost the soil, because a lot of times I'll take it out and the soil is just falling off of it, it just won't stick to it. In order to get that out, I'll put it into pumice, into straight pumice, because it gives, it will hold a certain amount of moisture, but it'll also give you the oxygen that it needs to form new roots. So, those are ways that you can do it, but you can get away with, you know, if you have the time and it's on your property or something like that, you can get out and get some water to it. You can actually take care of that and develop roots before you take it.
So you just take a long spade and just kind of come in sideways to cut?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're probably going to take a saw at some point and go after that piece of wood, because it's not something that a spade's going to cut. I mean, I've had tap roots that are, you know, that big, and they'll laugh at a spade, you know, so you're going to have to get a saw in there and actually cut it.
Thank you.
Yeah. They're fun to take, and they're you can be very, very successful at it too. Okay. There are certain things that drive growth, and one of the things that kind of tells the plant where it's supposed to be growing are the hormones that it has in it. And one of the most important ones that we have is auxin. Auxin is a hormone that is at the very tip of this piece right here. It's at the very tip on the top of the tree that you have right here. It's at the top of this particular piece here. And this hormone, this is how trees, I hate to say make decisions, but hormones are the things that drive what a tree is doing. If we snip off this piece at the top, what we've done is we remove the auxin that is there. Auxin is a hormone that controls growth towards the sun. When you cut that off, or one of the other things that it does is it suppresses any growth below that. In other words, the side shoots that normally would come out won't come out because of that particular hormone. You cut that off, the hormone is gone, and all of a sudden these other ones are able then to start to expand. In other words, the most of the energy was going to the upright piece, and that was cut off. And so the side shoots that can come in. That's exactly how we build branches, how we fill out a tree and make it look like an actual tree, because we're doing that. Now, nature takes the tips off of these things also, and it cuts them back and allows the side branches to grow. But we do it, and we do it a little bit quicker by cutting back and doing some pruning on that. Anytime that you're pruning, you're actually changing something that I'm going to talk about right now, which is the part that I added to your pieces here, which is pruning effect on what its effect is on energy. Shoot strength sequence. In other words, this is the strongest part of the tree, then the first branch that comes off is the second strongest, the third strongest, the fourth, the fifth, and whatnot going down. If I remove this particular piece, what I've done is I've changed that sequence. In other words, there's no number one anymore. This now becomes the number one, the top one on there. This becomes number two. This becomes number three and whatnot. So you alter that number. You change the way that the thing is growing. That's what makes it work as far as the pruning is concerned. It's a very important thing that once you make that cut, you're redistributing that growth and you're pushing down that sequence down farther on the branch. So each one of these are going to be a little bit weaker as it goes down. Getting rid of this one or getting rid of these three here is going to change it. If I got rid of all of these up in here, this is number one, this is number two, this is number three. So it changes, and then it will grow out, and this number one then will get or a good bit of the energy that you have here. Number two will get a little bit of the energy, a little bit less than number three, and so on. So that's kind of the sequence of this entire thing. It's an important concept, and it allows us to create a full and more balanced type of tree here. So, do you have any questions about that? What actually pruning does? It forces growth farther down, and it changes the priority of the tree so that it's sending energy to then the top piece. It becomes the number one, and it will start to form auxin, and eventually what it'll do is start to suppress everything that's behind that. That's why if we keep on pinching that, we keep on feeding those shoots that are below it. And that's what gives us that full filling on the trees. Okay, I see at least a few nods. That's good. No, this is something you have to think about a little bit, but it's the way that pruning actually works on a tree. It just changes those points of growth and redistributes the energy throughout the tree. Any questions? Yes. Oh, which one? This one?
Yeah.
This one over here. Okay, this one is a different thing. This is a cork bark. A heavy cork bark. And I got tired of having foliage all the way out here and not having enough inside. So I cut everything back on this tree. And I did that. Okay, I did this on March 16th of this year. And I cut everything off. There wasn't a stick on there. There wasn't anything with green on it. Completely back to wood. In other words, I wasn't just defoliating it. I was cutting it back. And this one I brought this to show you what kind of response you can expect on these trees if you really do it. If I were to have done this on this tree right over here, and I were to have done it right over here, and I cut it right back to that point, it's so little on the mass of the tree that the tree probably would figure, okay, I can grow someplace else and I don't have to worry about that. And it would just absorb the energy that is lost here. But when I did this, it's like taking a 2x4 and getting the attention of a mule, banging him upside the head. It got his attention. And you can see that it has nice growth going all the way around, except right here. What happened here? I'll tell you what happened here. I took this tree up to Marin about 2.5 weeks ago, and in my car, I busted off the piece that started growing right here. So I've lost that part. I still have this one and I have this one. I can still work with it, but it was because of me that this whole thing didn't work out totally the way I wanted it to. But this gives you an idea that you can actually do some of these things. If you really want to make a radical change on it, you have to go wholeheartedly into this thing. If you do it timidly, it's not going to work as well. You gotta make the big cuts and just trust that it's actually going to grow. Yes, again. No, other than being disgusted with the tree, no. No, I got mad at the tree and I said, you're going to grow or you're going to die. And I was just tired of it. It's just, you got to do something. Anyway, this is something that can work out. And I've got to let these run just for a little while just to get the strength back in it. But you can see it just exploded with growth and it's doing what I wanted it to. I told you these were for a purpose. Yes, ma'am.
Did this growth all come without your fertilizing it? And the second part of that question is Osmocote the only fertilizer that you use?
No. I mean, okay, so did I fertilize beforehand? No. I put this on once these things were growing and they were growing really well. I didn't have a problem with that. I could have done that because all I'm doing is I want a response and I want as much response as I can. So putting fertilizer on it right away probably wouldn't have been such a bad idea because of what I wanted to do. Keep in mind, you have reasons for what you want to do, and sometimes it makes sense to put fertilizer on, sometimes not. If I'm looking to ramify or do some really small things to it, I probably wouldn't put fertilizer on it. What I wanted was, this is a do or die thing, and I said, do or die. And it did. So let's give a big hand to the tree. Okay. Did what I was supposed to do. Okay. So this one was one that actually Peter and I worked on little over a month ago, and we cut it back to a couple of leaves in each particular place. I had lost a couple of the branches on this. Again, that's a fairly normal thing. You have everything going just perfectly the way you want it, and then the one you just can't afford to lose, it just dies out. Anyway, so I cut this back, and this is the kind of the reaction was in a matter of 6 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, I think it was. That's a lot of growth, but it can be done, and this is the time to do that. If you're going to do it well. The energy is there where you can really get it to go. And also, I wanted to bring this one because you notice all of these little stubs on here. There's all kinds of new little pops on the base of this. They will bud out, and they always do bud out. Think of these as being in California, and California has all these wildfires, and they've always had wildfires. They just have more of them now. But these trees can get burned out, and you can lose a lot of the tops of the trees, but rarely does it actually kill the tree totally. From the base, it's going to start sending up new shoots, new buds, and new branches, and new trunks and whatnot, and will reform the forest land as it was. But in this case, I want to take these off. I wanted to leave them here so I could take them off for you. So we're just going to take a few of these off and keep that plucked out because I don't want branches down in this area. This particular tree I took over in the Santa Cruz area, and this is my rat tree. Basically what this was I was digging this tree, and I'll tell you, when I saw it, I was so excited. I saw this base and everything, and it was actually about 10 feet up in this direction, but it was really kind of sickly up there. It wasn't doing well because of some of the neighboring trees that were there, but it was actually growing at this angle. In other words, trees, oak trees even, they can be semi-cascade type of trees. They'll follow the topography, whatever it is, the hillside or the rocks or whatever it happens to be. And that's exactly what happened in this particular case. When I started digging this, I was all enthusiasm, and I was wailing away, and I was digging here and there. And I finally got really pretty close to the whole thing, and up pops this rat about this far away from my eye. It scared me to death. I scared him too, but I mean, there was actually a nest underneath this particular tree. And actually, he helped me dig some of it because I didn't have to go through the dirt that was there. But boy, did he scare me. So this is my rat tree. Are there any other questions? This one is a coast live oak. This is a coast live oak. This is a canyon live oak. This is Quercus chrysalopus. And this one is a Quercus lobata, which is a valley oak. And this one is a Quercus suber, which is a cork oak. You can see the cork is really pronounced on this particular one. If anybody has a chance, ask Kathleen. She's got a picture of cork when she was in Portugal, wasn't it? Portugal, and it's the paneling and everything. Huge things with all the fissures, just like this, all the way up and down. It's really a neat photograph. Any other questions that you might have?
Is anybody growing Kellogg's black oak?
I'm sorry.
Is anybody growing Kellogg's black oak?
Oh, Kelloggy?
Yeah, Kellogg
Yeah.
guy.
Okay,
I
yeah,
haven't
black
seen
oak.
any, I'm just curious.
Up where remember I was talking about up at my daughter's house at the end of her driveway, they had black oaks, and they tend to be groups, and they'll kind of sprout in mass coming out. Really interesting, and you can. It's more mountainous than what we have in San Jose, although there are some places up in Santa Cruz Mountains where you can find Kelloggy. But for the most part, this is a higher altitude type of thing. They're up at about 3,800 feet or something at Quincy. There's no reason why they can't be ideal. As a matter of fact, I had them clean out some of the conifers in their backyard because they had this magnificent one in their backyard. But conifers were, you know, there were a couple of fir trees or something that were growing up right in the middle of the whole thing and just kind of ruining the. Anyway, I had, but yes, you can take them. You can. I have not, just because they're, you know, I haven't been up there with my digging tools and whatnot. But yeah, no, I'd love to try it too. But yes, Kalagi, why not? Why not? Also, you have blue oaks around here. Does anybody have a blue oak in their collection? Yeah, I've got one, or I've got a couple, and they're really interesting. The bark is a little bit different than the valley oak. It's not as beautifully fissured, and sometimes it's a little kind of craggy, but really interesting, but really deep blue. I mean, real good color on it. And sometimes you actually see when blues and white oaks like the valley oak are together, when they, let's say, commingle and whatnot, they, a lot of times, so the lobatas around there will actually have a blue tone too, which is really kind of neat. But the lobata is there, and it's named because of all the lobes in the leaves themselves. When the explorers were coming out to California, they really originally thought that these were English oaks, you know, like the normal oaks that they would find back in Europe and in England. But the leaf is really formed differently. If you'll notice, an English oak kind of opens up from the petiole, which is at the base, that kind of comes up, and then a little bit of a more of a chestnut color, you know, kind of leaf. They do have some lobes, and there's some similarities, but it's also a much thicker and heavier leaf than the lobatas that we have here. But I love these trees. They're really something. Any other questions? And then we'll start talking about your trees after your business meeting or whatever that is. Yes, Paul.
Just curious if you've had much success collecting blue oaks. It seems like it's the most difficult one I've tried to collect.
Yes. Okay, and I find the same thing. We had access to some property over in San Antonio Valley, which is, if you know San Jose, there's some mountains to the east of us, and you go over those original mountains and you get down to the other side. And there was a rancher out there who had 10,000 acres, big place, and he was running cattle out there. And anything that he could do that would give him more grass and less trees, he was happy with. So we went out there and collected them. And I can remember seeing a couple of these blue oaks that were just on in an open area in the middle of a meadow. It was basically where it was. And they were really small. And I was saying, my God, they've already been bonsai'd. Well, the cattle go up and they rub their udders and whatnot, and they just use them, and they just keep them small size. But I thought, this is perfect. And then I started digging that particular tree, and I found that there were no roots until it got down maybe 4 feet. I mean, it was a long way down. It was impractical. I couldn't keep them alive. Yeah, but man, the tops and everything, to die for. Yeah. No, there's a lot of, yes, Bill. Okay, yes, I heard the question. We're talking about air layering. Is that a successful thing? It's hard. It's very difficult. And a lot of times, because of the bark that you have on there, it's difficult to tell exactly how deep to go into your cuts. But it is possible to do, and I have air layered a few trees, but I needed to have a clear area. Okay, air layering, just for those who are thinking about it, air layering is trying to take the top of a tree or a part of the tree and actually form roots on it while it's still growing on its normal tree. So what you do is you take a band of bark all the way around and you remove that. What you have to do is you have to remove the cambium layer. Remember, you've got the phloem, which is the outside material that the outside layer of the tree, where the sap and everything comes back down, is distributed throughout the tree. Then you have the cambium layer where all the other cells are actually made. That little area, it's just a one cell thick little area there that kicks out both phloem and xylem to the inside. Xylem is what brings the water back up to the top of the tree, to the leaves, and through the branches and whatnot, and then it photosynthesizes, and then it comes down through the phloem. Okay, you have to remove all of the phloem because that's a downward cycle. Remove all of the phloem, and you have to remove all of the cambium. And you can go just a little bit into the xylem, which is the vessels, the vascular portion of this tree, which is bringing the water back up, because it's effective not just on the very tip, but it goes in. The farther it goes in towards heartwood, the less active it actually is. Okay, that's the technical part. So what you have to do is you have to remove those parts so that you have enough of the xylem left that it can actually bring the water up to the tree. And because you've cut off the phloem, it can't go down any farther than where you made that cut. So you're telling the tree basically at that point either form roots or die. And that's basically the message. And most of the time it will form messages or form roots. Now what you do is you might hit that top portion with some rooting hormone that actually stimulates roots to start forming in there. And then you pack it with some sphagnum moss or some soil, and you put some kind of a container around it. Now that can be a larger nursery pot or something like that that's filled with soil, or it could be a bag with sphagnum moss basically in it. And what you do is you keep that moist. In other words, you want to keep that watered so that you can form the roots when this thing starts to come down. Now, it doesn't always work for me either, Bill. So, I can't say that it's 100% successful, but it is possible. What I've noticed is that if I didn't cut a large enough area, or I didn't get cut far enough in there, it would actually bridge over. And I'd be just as elated as anything because, boy, it's still alive. It's still kicking out. Must have a lot of roots in there. No, it just bridged over that and it reestablished, how it was growing. Rats. Yeah, that's what I said. Any other questions that we might have? Yes.
How long can you expect it to take for the roots to form?
On an air layer?
Yeah.
Okay. You're probably dealing with getting into the next year. So if you did this, let's say that you did this in June, or you did this in, let's say January or sometime, one of the two of those, after it has actually gone through one growth cycle, it's functioning. I would say probably about a year from there. I'd check it every so often. If, you can dig down and you can actually see whether something's happening. The first thing that's going to happen is callousing. You're going to get a callus in there and it's going to start to grow out a little bit from that area. In other words, you have a nice clean cut there, and all of a sudden you're going to have tissue that's starting to attach there. It will differentiate into roots at some point, as long as you keep it moist and keep it going. But I think it's probably about a year before you're really going to be able to see progress.
About 3 to 5 months.
Okay, if you get them 3 to 5 months, do you want them developed enough?
Start off and replant it.
Okay.
It works well around here.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, he was saying that he gets it done in about 5 months or so, 3 to 5 months. Okay. No, that's excellent. You're doing something very good. 90 days is what it takes. Okay. Okay. You guys do it faster than I do. That's great. Yes, in the back.
process.
Okay, I'm usually taking most of the foliage off. When you collect a tree, it's probably as healthy and happy as it's going to be for the next few years. All of a sudden you're taking off its primary source of, of its moisture and whatnot and nutrients. So what I do is I take off most of the foliage there. Any cuts that I make, I'll cut branches back, way back. And I will seal off those cuts that I have made. And I will keep it probably in, I wouldn't put it out in direct sun right off the bat. What I'd probably do is give it, some morning sun and mostly shade at that point. But I don't want to overcome the entire thing. So that's kind of what I do. But I keep it as moist as possible in that area. And I might even just water the bark itself, throughout the tree. But you want to make sure that you have a soil on there that it's going to be porous, like the pumice that I was talking about. It'll actually drain real quickly. It'll keep enough moisture in there without it being wet. And being wet, it can hurt the tree real quickly if it's soaking wet all the time.
All right. Show and tell here, folks. Who's got the first tree here?
Well, all I can say is that that's my thy oak, and I've been working with it for quite a few years now, and I think I need some help with it. I don't, it's not doing too well, I don't think. And the other one is my oak also, and I'm trying to get it to thicken out, get more leaves on it. And I'm not being very successful at oaks, so I need all the help I can get. Cool.
We talking about this?
We're talking about these two, yeah.
Okay. So tell me, say it again. I was up in front. I didn't catch what you were saying.
Well, I'm trying to get this one to thicken up, and get more leaves. Not thicken up in branches, but in leaves, get more leaves on it. And I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
Well, I wouldn't say you're so much doing things wrong. I think one thing that you can do here is you can actually shorten these out. And now's not a bad time to do that. Shorten these out to maybe a couple, maybe a little bit longer. Get the form that you want. In other words, your apical area is right here on this tree. You want this a little bit taller. And then this one's going to be kind of separate from that, but it's going to form a piece right here. But you want this one to actually grow out a little bit more up in here. This one, I would say, let's start by thinning this out to allow this to grow up a little bit more and not pinch this off where your fingers are. In other words, taking off the older leaves, let this grow out a little bit farther, and then we'll start to pinch back.
Oh,
See, these are gone. Yeah, take those off.
Oh.
Yeah, because those are not performing anymore. You look at this one and you can see it's damaged and the tree itself is giving up on it. And it's actually more of a draw now than anything else. So I'd take those off. And just strengthen that whole thing off, and then you start pinching back to it. But most of these, you're going to be taking back a lot of these leaves and just leaving one or two leaves. And this time of year, you could almost defoliate, especially on the top here, you can almost defoliate most of that, and it's going to form new roots for you, or new leaves for you. Yeah. No, it's pretty tough that way, and they'll come back. But don't just do one or two leaves; it'll just never notice the difference. Do a bunch of them.
And what the same thing with that one?
Okay, this one. Here, you hold this. Mind if I turn this?
No, I don't.
This looks like a little bit more. This looks a little bit more friendly as far as the front is concerned because everything is coming towards you. I'm going to put it down again. Okay. Your apical area is basically up in here. Your apical area up in here, this one is coming very far forward. If I were using this tree and I wanted to use this as the apex of the tree, I'd probably tilt it back a little bit. In other words, I'd move it back in this direction here. So that would bring this a little bit farther like that. And I'd take this piece that was crossing over the side, and I would keep this as the apex area and then build the rest of it from there.
So you would take this out?
Yes, I would,
Oh, okay.
because this is crossing over. What you want to do on most of these trees, what you want to do is you want to have radial growth as well as radial roots. This one is more tangential. In other words, here's the core of the tree and it's going off to the side here or following in front of it. It's too much of a straight line coming across. So if you took this back, and you might take it back just about to here, and you'd be surprised, you're going to get some pops right behind that. Wherever you make your cut, you're going to get some good pops there. And that can be part of the new top. That when we tip this tree back, now this one will become a branch and not this long thing that's heading straight out. So does everybody see what we're talking about here? And this actually would have a very nice look to it. You know, it's just the angle. If you stop to think about it, and you think about putting it on a gyroscope so that you can twist it or turn it in all kinds of different angles and pitches, it's amazing. A tree that you really wouldn't like to have in your collection, you get it at the right angle, and all of a sudden you're going to have a whole new tree, whole new way of looking at it, and it can really change a tree for the better. So I would take this guy right over there. No, nice tree. And you've got some good bark going on it.
Take that from you. Can I give you that back? All right, Kirk.
Yeah, this is a valley oak I got 2 years ago at our show here. So a little over 2 years ago. It was much taller when I got it, and I sort of made the last major cuts on it. So it does still have some big wounds on it, but they're closing. And yeah, developing. I'm having a heck of a time pulling down its the main branch on the left there. It's stiff, but it is coming down. I don't know if it'll ever really set that low, but it's there.
Okay,
So, pardon the ugly guy.
Okay. My observation on this is one of the things that you have here is magnificent. You have great bark. Look at the bark on this thing. It's just wonderful. This is a really steady kind of an upright tree, more upright than normal for an oak. You were saying you were having a hard time bringing this branch down.
Yeah,
Probably because it wants
branch.
to grow up.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is how they grow. They really are happier if they come out. If this actually were probably put into an area like this, it would look more natural than trying to bring it out straight. This is something that typically we do with the conifers, is to bring those branches down and then form things around them. But in most of the deciduous trees, especially the oak trees, and especially a valley oak, you know, you want to have some of that movement. Now, this is a single trunk, and you're not going to get away from, you know, this is a way of showing it too. There's no reason that it has to be that wild oak looking thing. This has more of a look of I would say an elm or something like that in a landscape, you know, which is fairly upright and all the branches coming off of it, as opposed to splitting into major branches that are actually sub trunks. And, but I would tend to try to bring this up into this area as opposed to trying to bring it down, especially if you have this. You can't bend this. This is just too big. If you try to weaken it here, it's going to crack, it's going to break, everything's going to go on it. So go with what you got and allow it to come back up if you feel like it. If you like it in that down position, fine. It's your tree. You can do anything that you want. But from a natural standpoint, I would tend to allow some of these branches to kind of billow up. Even at a small angle, it's just a little bit more natural for this tree to be treated like that than to have the flat branches going out. And I think you'd really enjoy it that way.
I'm definitely fighting the urge between the more natural style,
Yes.
but also filling a huge void that was here.
Oh,
I mean, this branch was up here,
right?
Exactly where you're talking.
Yeah.
But of course, you know, there's a big hole there.
Okay, but you can also bring the tree around a little bit. You know, if you could bring it up into this area here and allow it to come up here and show this is the front of your tree. It shows nice movement going up into it, and you still have movement going in the trunk, but it would just have a fuller life here. Now, keep in mind that most of these trees also grow wider than they are tall. You know, so you can keep this flat. It doesn't have to be at a peak at this point, but you can allow some of these branches to actually start to billow and to give you a wider type of tree in here. But I think this is a losing battle. And I would love to see it, you know, going a little bit more upright here. Even to the point, if you wanted to, you could take off a portion of this and just leave this, get this up a little, you know, take this strain up. You got a turnbuckle on here, allow it to grow up a little bit. At this point, because you've probably had it like this for a while, you might need to have a spacer that's actually bringing it up a little bit as opposed to pulling it down.
That movement only started in the last,
Cool.
this spring. So it would,
Okay.
if I took this off and I can't actually, it would rebound a
Yes.
good 4 inches.
Cool. But it's a beautiful tree. It's nice. It's in nice sized leaves and the bark is just wonderful. And that's it's kind of like a black pine. Black pines are one of the most valuable parts of them are the bark that you get, the old bark that you get in the fissured bark. And that's one feature that you always want to be able to show. And you want to, but I think with this out, you don't have to have everything equal. In other words, you don't have to have this down here to balance out this, because bonsai and many trees are not totally balanced all the way around. There's one side is always a little bit larger than the others. And I think this would fit just naturally right up where it was. So, no, this is a valley oak. This is a lobata, and the lobata is because they have all these lobes that are in the leaves themselves. That's how it was named.
Thank you.
Beautiful trees, though.
All
Good.
right.
How are we going on along
Working
the
our
line?
way down here, yeah.
And? Mm-hmm.
A Japanese live oak, and I wanted at a Sekukai meeting round. And the sun's been a little hard on it. And the pot is by that Vicky Blair and Ashland, so it's kind of a different one too.
This is another one that might be fun to change the angle a little bit and then allow your apex to come up into this area above this. You'd probably want to have it a little bit slanted this way because of the.
You can see that it was much taller
Yeah.
because there's that big scar at the top. So.
Right. So maybe what we would be doing here is taking this branch that's off in the back and actually making the apex off of something a little bit higher here. But you get the widest part here, you get nice nabari from this side, and we can probably get foliage to actually change that.
Cover it up.
Yeah. Because it's going to take an awful lot of growth in order to clean this up. Also, when you're trying to clean this, it won't climb a hill. So you'd have to bring the actual dead wood down to the level of the live tissue
So it starts
before it'll start to cling and grow over the top of it. And it's going to be tough because there's really nothing on top here to really draw, but it's possible to do, or to bring it over on this side and then you don't have that.
Oh, it's starting to bark up
Yeah.
too, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. I kind of like it over here just because of you got a beautiful base over here. Over in this side, you also have a dead area. Now this could be made, remember we were talking about uro, that kind of concave inside. You can actually carve this out and bring this inside kind of like a knot or, a bird's nest kind of thing in the middle of everything. That would be kind of effective down here. And oaks do that, you see that quite often. But you have a nice base to this entire tree. What you try to do is you try to put it in such a way that it shows best for what it is. And sometimes that would be a really cool thing to do. The only thing is your apex is moving away from you on this side. And I don't care for that. I'd much rather have it up in here and then allow this to grow up a little bit more, put it on an angle so that when you repot it, it's going to be potted down like this. And then get that sway and allow this to grow out and this other side also. You may find that you might not eventually need this particular branch so that you have more growing over on here, having a lot of growth here, and then keeping this a little bit shorter. Nice tree though, cute.
It's one I can lift.
No, I know what you mean. And I brought the small ones too. And we got a cork bark here.
Cork bark?
I literally just grabbed it off the bench as I was coming. So, he said, bring an oak. I brought an oak.
Well, thank you. No, that's great.
And I've done practically nothing to it other than water and food for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Had health issues and a lot of my bonsai are looking like this.
Okay, but by cutting back some of the ones that are leggy and not really giving you a whole lot, this one has a lot of character to it. Remember we were talking about in there making a defect into an effect?
Mhm.
Some of the dead things that you have in here could be very interesting if you show them. A lot of times in bonsai, we will have a tree and there'll be a defect to it. And we try to hide it. You know, you throw it around in the back and everything. There's always some smart aleck that kind of looks around your tree like that and says, I know why you did that. Look at that. That's awful. What you need to do is you need to put it right in front of people and you need to carve that into something that is really interesting so that it becomes a focal point as opposed to a shame point. So don't be afraid to do that. I think the way that this is set up, this might not be a bad front, but some of the branches are coming out right towards you.
Mhm.
And you might actually take some of these branches. This lower one seems to be a little bit of a problem. I might remove that and remove the things that are crossing over the front. And then actually tilt this one instead of behind, maybe bring this a little bit forward like that so we can bring the apex up in here and then allow these branches. I love the way that this one comes out. This one's a great little branch over here. And then keeping something like this coming out. And these are going to be growing, but they need to be cut back really hard
Okay.
so that you get, instead of everything coming out here, you get it to come out very, very close to where these branches are. Then you can kind of restart this whole thing.
Okay.
But I would take off a number of these. This bottom one kind of bothers me. You might
Mhm.
keep this portion of it because it's going off to the side, but this one is coming a little bit too far forward
Yeah.
to really be useful in this tree. And this one is crossing over that also, so might be removing that. But fun little tree.
Thank
And
you.
then really cut it back. And I mean, like I say, when you're cutting back, cut it back.
Way back.
Way back. It's going to grow back. You saw what happened to the trees that I have up there. Just
Okay.
have confidence that that's going to happen on your tree too.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank
But
you.
I like this as your front.
All right. Who's, should have guessed.
This is my Quercus Virginia, a Portuguese oak. I got it some years ago from Vince, who had acquired it from the now defunct Calaveras nursery in Valley Springs, which was
Oh,
an
yeah.
all oak nursery. And
Yeah.
some of my best oaks came from there. It's
I
too bad
remember the
too bad it's gone
Stoddards,
there.
the Stoddards out there. Yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, I've been working on it. I've been trying to improve the Nabari. It had lots of winding roots and I've gradually removed the bad roots. It's still got a few
Mhm.
that need to go, but that's my main project for the future with it. I love the bark on it though.
Oh, it is. It's wonderful. And I'm trying to think if you change the angle a little bit on this, and actually brought this forward a little bit this way. You can bring this tree into prominence, a little bit more prominence, by bringing that towards the front on this side, and then bringing this back. It might be an effective way of doing it. You have a pretty good root display out in this area. Coming here, you might want to keep this, but bringing this in might be a fun front for this particular tree, so that you're really looking at it like this, but then at an angle that brings it up a little bit, so that this is a little bit more prominent. As it's sitting now, the crown of this is actually going a little bit back, a little bit far behind you. Now this shows just fine. I mean, you can keep it this way, and then you might want to bring the apex of this a little bit farther forward. You're going to keep it over here, and then keep a separation between this portion and this tree, so that you can tell that they're two separate entities. And I think that'll work nicely. This one needs to actually come a little bit farther forward this way. It's again aimed back towards that back area. And I think over time you could bring this forward a little bit, and then favor the growth on this side, bring it out a little farther this way, and then take off some of the foliage on the back of this to fill that out. That would be a good way of doing it too. And the rest of the branches are pretty well set. It's just kind of cleaning them up and showing the individual branchlets that are in there. And well, yeah, I mean, but they're all shaggy at this point. You can see all the gunk I have to do. I mean, this is a lot of work, but this is the time to do it. It's a great time to do it. And this actually wouldn't be bad. But again, bring that forward and bring this one a little bit forward also. And force this one forward, and then encourage this growth a little bit more than the back growth that you have here. And then keeping this nice and kind of rounded, because here's about where the apex and where the top of the tree should be, and it should kind of then spread out a little bit. But wow, bark is great. Pardon me? If you're going to do this, the farther you go into the year, the less percentage of new leaves you're going to actually get. In other words, if you did it right now, you'd probably get most of them, especially if you defoliated the tops of the crowns. In other words, the crown up on top, some of this, these areas that are going to get a lot of sun, they will pop back almost immediately. They're the quick ones. Where you have a little bit of problem is some of these lower ones. If you need to bring out, in other words, get things to reach out in this direction, you might not want to defoliate them. You may want to thin some of the back growth so that you can get them to expand out in this direction, and then start to, once it gets out a little bit farther, then be able to start to form, to defoliate and to get more leaves in there. Yeah, and you could probably do that again one more time. I noticed one thing with the Ithabarensis that I had is that it comes out really early, and then about midway through the summer, all the foliage just decides to go gunky. Okay, so that's right. And so defoliate it, get a new set of branches in there, or a new set of leaves in there, and it'll be just fine. But I think you got to do that, because they look a little ratty later on in the year. And it would help you, and it'd speed up what you're doing. But I like that, you still get the feeling here with the roots gone, and you probably had an air root that came out here and did something foolish and whatnot. But it looks pretty nice from over here too, so you're not having a problem. It's a beautiful tree. Did you get that up at Valley Spring? Yeah, Pat and can't remember his Pat and Mick. They taught me so much about oaks. I mean, they know oaks. No, and they don't do well that much where I am, but I can keep them a little bit cooler than where you are. Oh, yeah. Okay, like I say, my kids are up at 3,500, and they're just endemic. They're everywhere. This is, you don't see some of the other oaks up there, but you see black oaks all the time. They're great.
All right, next.
Hey, Kathleen.
I think this is a valley oak.
Sure looks it.
Okay, it's got the lobed leaf. It's a tree that I bought at a club sale in 1990. So I've had it for a long time and worked with it. At one point, it was a lot taller, and with Ted Matson, we cut it off. It was at least as twice as tall as it is now. But that was done, in I don't know, a long, long time ago. So it's been in development for a long while.
Well, one neat thing about there are a lot of neat things about the tree, but again, look at the bark, everybody. This is really pretty cool. Very nice. And you notice that the movement and what he cut off to the movement that you have in this particular tree. And that's what we all should be thinking about doing. Once it starts to go straight, it's not doing you any good. As a matter of fact, it's taking your eye out of the form that you really want to form up, and keeping the movement up in this kind of manner really has done very well for this tree. It's hard to knock anything that's going on with it. It's just a very, very nice tree. One of the things that you do have kind of wraparound little roots, but that was probably done years and years ago, when it was in a container, and it just kept on going. But the branching and everything that's coming off of this for a small tree is just magnificent. I don't have too much to say other than
Should
I really
be defoliating it now? Or
No.
leave it? Okay.
and I would do less defoliation for valley oaks and for blue oaks than I would for live oaks. I found that the live oaks really respond real well. I mean, they just pop right back. And because the valley oaks are shooting oaks. In other words, they're putting out an awful lot of energy to get that shoot to go out and for these leaves to be produced. I would do it more in the cutback type of cutting on this than defoliation, because I've had some of them where they don't completely come back, and it's always the area that you need it most that it decides it doesn't want to come back. So, Vince, do you have any comment on that? On defoliation of the valley oaks?
I've never done it on valley oak. I worked with mine.
Yeah, live oaks are pretty tough, and they can do that. This one, okay, I have more luck because this is deciduous, or the one that I have is deciduous. I have much more luck at cutting these back than I do of these. In other words, these natives here, I'm not sure they really like it.
Would there be any reason to defoliate that?
Well, halfway through the year, you might notice that everything's getting a little bit ragged. That could very well be. They're all young and everything, but you might think about thinning some of this too, so that you can see the interior of it. When it's like the one that I had back there, it's so thick that it's almost like broccoli, and you can't see into it. You can't get some of the effect of the actual branches, which is the neat thing about most of these trees. Yeah, like that. Okay, we got a new one.
Whose tree is this? Oh, sorry. Should have yelled.
Yeah.
All right, take it back.
Hi, this is another tree from Vince. And we think it's a
I think it's a cherry live oak.
You think it's what?
interior live oak.
Interior? Well, these are flat leaves. The only difference is that typically the coast live oak are going to have really pretty cupped leaves that you see. Also where they grow, you can get interior live oak going all the way up to where the black oaks are. So, they're usually in the foothills and a little bit above there. I think is where they come from. And typically you're going to get better bark. So you're going to start to get more of this kind of bark than you do on a coast live oak. Coast live oak is going to give you this kind of thing for quite a bit of its life. And really old ones like the one that are there are just kind of, old gnarly things that have been growing forever. But the flatness of these could very well be interior live oak. Okay, so let's look at some of the features that you have here. This was a huge piece that was growing at some point and was cut back because they wanted to develop everything that was going on in here. I'm looking at the relative size of the branches here, or trunks, and this one is coming up, and it seems to be the heaviest piece in this entire piece. So I'm wondering if maybe we could bring that up or fashion it in such a way that we can because the deadwood here, although it is, can be interesting, is pretty much it's kind of in your face from this standpoint because here's where it would be upright. Let's see if bringing it up in this manner might work. And then coming up with this is an apical area. This one is an apical area. And then maybe, cutting back on some of these and shortening some of these branches in here and bringing it more to the side and giving you a little bit more this way. You might want to bring this one up and have it go up and out as opposed to coming down and out. Looks like there was a little damage in here, so I'm not sure whether that's going to be working too well for you. But you could also cut this one back in a major, way back and really cut them shorter and get them to bust out where you want them. And I think that's probably what you'd like to do with this one. But I could see maybe bringing it up in this direction. In other words, bringing it more upright like this, going with this as the apex of the tree, and then cutting back huge sections of, cutting back into here and here and here, and just leaving stubs in there. And then, using cut paste to close those off and let them blast. And this wouldn't be a bad time to do it. I'm about to cut up a couple of little young guys over there that I was given by Nancy Schramm. And what I see is this tree is going to be much shorter than what they are up there. And I think now's the time to do it. Okay. I like the bark of the tree and the movement that you get off of this is really nice. This lower branch coming out here might be a little problematic, so that may not work. But if you cut here, you never know where they're going to pop. You just never know. But if you cut too far out, that's where it's going to pop, where you don't want it, where you don't need it. You want to cut back right where you want it and then trust that it'll do it. And then feed it. Yeah,
thank you.
Because what you want is the big reaction like I got on the other ones.
So the rest of these are raffle, but I wanted to
Okay.
Is this a bonsai yet? No, I'm kidding. I thought it'd be interesting to just get some feedback on a super early stage development of a blue oak.
Anytime you first look at a tree, first thing you want to do, since this is a raffle item, I can look in here. You want to find out where those roots are coming from. Right now it's covered up by soil. And you want to see where the base is, where those roots are actually coming out. I'm still going down. Okay, so I've got a couple, I think it's here and here. This one has movement that goes off to the side that was cut off. It was a long shoot that we had here. You may find that your tree is going to be a little bit more like that. Whenever you plant these things, don't plant them straight up and down. Give them a little angle when you first start them off so that when they do develop, they give you a kind of interesting trunk coming up. Most of the straight up and down, you can hardly get it going straight up and then have it all curly Q out, like an oak does. So put it on a little angle so you give it a little bit of a break. Let's see if it looks better from this side. Yeah, and you could do it from this side. Actually, probably wouldn't be bad. You want to get this so that it isn't straight up and down. We never want to see a trunk that's, or a branch that's straight up and down or perpendicular. It looks man-made when it does it. Always give it a little bit of an angle, break it off of that. And it doesn't bother your eyes so much when you look at it. It's when it's straight up and down, you're going, not so good. And when it's going straight across like that, it really does look artificial. So give it a little bit of a bend, get that angle out of it. So one way or another, it's going the way that you want it. So I would take this one, probably do a little bit of work on this. And all you're going to be keeping of this is this first little bit here. You allow this to run so that it sets and it gets larger, but you wire it out to this point and then just let that run for the rest of the year. And then you cut that off, say about December or so. And then you go with your new tree as it comes out. Then you just pick one or two of these little buds here, and these are going to be the new branches and the new part of the tree that you want to have. So a little bit of wire would go a long way. Same thing with this one. You want to do the same thing with that. Again, you want those branches to go up and out, but they can sway around and do all kinds of strange things because it's an oak. They have permission to do that. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you.
That's what I would do there.
Yeah, so this is all raffle. So,
you know, this almost looks like an island oak. I've got a couple that are island oaks that have huge leaves and whatnot. Let's see if the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. Okay. These are opposite, or excuse me, these are alternating budding trees that we have here. All of the oaks are. But one of the advantages that it gives you is because the leaves come off at about 140 to 44 degrees from each other. So it goes 2 complete turns, and there are five leaves in between ones that are at the same point in the stem. In other words, it goes around, goes around, goes around, goes around, goes around, and then it's back to its original point of origin. And this is a way that this tree is adapted to get these leaves out so they aren't interfering with each other as it's growing. And it's a wonderful adaptation. And it's true of almost all of the oaks that you're going, or all of the oaks that you're going to see. It's just the way that they grow. But it also gives you a chance to, at any one of those points, to cut it off there and change the direction of the entire branch. A lot of alternating budded trees like elms and whatnot there's one on this side, one on this side, one on this side, one on this side. And it's almost like a row, complete row going all the way up. These give you that spin action so you can pick where you want to go and the tree itself will pick it. The valley oak is probably the most exciting tree that I see because of all the movement and all the crazy things that go on with it and where they twirl and grow out the way that they want. It's just the form of the tree is just so special. So I guess we're done with the oaks here. I'm going to just make a little sweet little cut on there and then put those 2 little things in the raffle here. We have a little oak here. You'll notice that it's already started to have some bark on it. The top is really kind of uninteresting. And in order to make anything out of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it like I have told you to do and just take it way down to the bottom here. In other words, all of this is going to be waste material. Look at what you can get. You're going to get movement right off the bat with this little branch that we have down in here. And so everybody say adios to that. Okay. So now think of this. If this was a $5 tree, I just took $4.95 off of it. And we have just this little start, but this is how you have to think about if you're gonna be having a tree, there's not much you can do with this, except put just a little bit of bend in it, but, you know, with the size that it is. But you can do infinite things with this little tiny piece that's now gonna bust out. And I have some cut paste, and I'll put some cut paste on that as soon as I'm finished with this guy. And you already know what I'm gonna do with this, except that you've got 3 little branchlets that are down here at the bottom. And they could be very, very interesting, but they have this one, you know, continuing on. If I allow this to grow, I'm not going to get any taper reduction between this piece and this piece, just because this is so big, it's just not going to show anything. So I want to stop it right now and cut this guy off too. It's going to make it much easier to get in the car, which of course is the important thing. But now you have, this is the apical area. This is your first branch that's coming out. And here's another little side branch. This is going to be a real cute little guy. Okay, so I made my first cut. You'll notice that there's a little indentation because this is a concave cutter. But if I cut it a little bit closer, I get it straight across. And I do have what they call root cutters, but I use them above ground all the time. They're much nicer. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this off. These are called root cutters, and they're straight cutters. And I use this. Okay, so now I've cut this straight across, and so that there isn't that little concave area that is in with the cut. And this one, I'll do the same thing too. I got a nice clean cut. Your best cut on any of these things is straight across the branch, straight across the branch. It gives you the smallest wound that you can have. So you don't want to have something that's got a big slant to it. Okay, and I'll use a little top gin and throw that on the tip of it.